I think the thing to realize is that as compliance professionals, your typical audience, we talk about the unbanked, underbanked all the time in lots of categories. This is probably the one time that you've heard a success story of taking a category of underbanked or unbanked people in our country and serving them. And this is actually quantifiable. It's a real result that has happened.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Banking Matters. I'm your host, Linsey Hugueley, and today we're joined by two incredible guests from the Association of Military Banks of America, Omuso George and Marty Mitchell. Welcome, guys.
Hello, Linsey and Marty. Good to see you. I just saw you, and I see you all the time. But it's good to see you in this venue.
Absolutely. Well, Linsey, we appreciate being here. I've known about you, Compliance Alliance. I've been around financial services for over 30 years after retiring from the Army. 26 years as a CRCM. If anybody wants to do the math, try to figure out how old I am. But it's really great at this point in my career as a regulatory compliance professional to get to join Association of Military Banks of America and put to use not only my heritage with the military, but my family. We have a long history. And it's really a pleasure to introduce you to General George, the CEO of AMBA, as we call it. He probably won't say it, but I want you to realize General George started out as a combat arms officer, air defense, artillery, transitioned later in life into the banking side, the financial side, as the military would call it, presented the budget to Congress, things like that. So I really think you'll enjoy hearing from him, and we really look forward to talking to you, your colleagues, about all that we have going on. And I realize as someone's been around this for so long, I didn't know what AMBA was. I mean, I'm a veteran, and in history of being a veteran, an FDIC examiner, and until I got to meet General George, I really had no idea. So I really appreciate the time that you're giving us, and we look forward to that. And with that, Sir Linsey, please go ahead, and I'll wherever you want me to jump in, I'll jump in. But otherwise, I hope to be quiet.
Well, thank you so much, Marty. And so that was a great introduction. And so just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, Omuso, for people that may not be familiar, what is the Association of Military Banks of America, or AMBA? And who do you guys serve?
And Linsey, thank you again for hosting us today. I really appreciate this opportunity to bring more awareness about AMBA, and so I'm really excited about this and grateful that Marty was able to connect us. Marty is a great connector. He also knows a lot of folks, as I'm finding out. So he's got a deep network, which is very helpful to us. But the Association of Military Banks of America is the nation's only nonprofit trade association that advocates for military banks. Okay, so what does that mean? What's a military bank? And I would define a military bank as a bank, those banks that are providing financial services and support to our military community. And when I say military community, I'm talking about the entire military community. Active duty military, reserve component, their family members, and then those who are no longer on active duty, but have obviously served, our veteran community, and in their families as well. And I'll just share a little bit of AMBA's history, because again, it's a trade association in much the same way as some other larger, maybe more recognizable trade associations like American Bankers Association or Independent Community Bankers Association, or CBA, whom we all do. We partner with all of them as well. They're all the bigs, and we're a little bit smaller, but we also do have a deep reach in the community that we serve, and very similar to state trade, bank trade associations. But AMBA started out in about 1959, and it was really at that time the federal government had recently authorized banks to basically work and reside and set up shop on military installations across the country and provide services to the military community on those installations. And some of our member banks, actually, their history goes back much farther than that. I mean, we have some banks that have been serving the military community for over 100 years. But in this, with AMBA, the original impetus was the banks that were actually on military bases at the time, who all shared unique characteristics in terms of the population they serve, unique challenges, and also there were unique opportunities with supporting the military community. And so AMBA was created really to kind of act as a liaison with the Department of Defense at that time on issues that they all share. I mean, anything from lease and rent issues associated with having a non-military entity on an installation. Those are common, things, kind of tenant landlord relationship, and then ways that our members, these banks, could provide better support to the community. And so it was stood up to do that at that time. Fast forward over many years up to now, and our membership absolutely, contains those original members and still within its core mission and focus continues to advocate for our member banks on military installations. But our membership has transformed since then. The majority of our members, and we're just over 100 member banks, and we do have a few corporate partners as well. But for those banks, now the majority of our members are not on military installations. But there's one unifying principle, and that's service and support to the military and veteran community. And so that's, kind of what we represent now, and we continue to advocate for those banks. And our membership is just as diverse as you could possibly imagine, anywhere from maybe one branch digital, really one branch banks with maybe not on a military installation, just outside the gates, or even in some cases, branchless digital banks, all the way up through regional banks to our large, national financial institutions, our very large banks with global reach, and like I said, basically everything in between. But again, the unifying purpose is the support, and that support can come in a number of ways. Obviously, specialized services for service members and the military veteran community and their families, but also reflecting the commitment to community support. Especially with a large number of our community banks that are absolutely involved in providing support and services in their local communities, supporting military and veteran outreach efforts and all kinds of needs that are out there. So that's what we're kind of focused on now. We we like to say that, hey, we're continuing to move military banking forward, and that's really what we're about.
And so, how is AMBA helping to bridge the gap between military life and banking access?
So we do have a number of programs that we highlight, and we're always continuing to look for new areas of advocacy and support. But one program I'll highlight that is fairly prominent for us is a program called the Veterans Benefits Banking Program, and this is actually it started out as a public, really a public-private partnership with one of our large federal agencies, with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Back in 2019, the VA came to AMBA with with a problem set, and that was the problem of unbanked veterans. And at the time, according to the VA's calculations, we had a population of about 250,000 veterans who were unbanked or underbanked, meaning they don't use, they don't have deposit accounts at a financial institution, whether it's a bank or credit union, or in the case of being underbanked, they perhaps were using, like a prepaid debit card, or using this program called Direct Express, where they could receive their monetary benefits on the card. But that in itself did come with some, it could come with some challenges and some problems for that for folks who use it. There were some problems. And so we, AMBA worked with the VA, and we worked with our members to really set up like an online marketplace of financial institutions who were committed to providing low to no cost, deposit accounts if a veteran or any VA beneficiary came to them with their monetary benefit, usually like a disability pension or education benefits. And the commitment that these banks would make is no minimum monthly balance, or no fee account, as long as they have the VA benefit being deposited there. And for those, for those financial institutions for which a VA benefit recipient can't qualify because they don't meet the specific requirements of that bank, that bank would be committed to trying to assist the veteran in some other way, either maybe with financial education or referral to some type of service and support. So to date, that program has, since its inception, helped over almost 800,000 VA benefit recipients get banked, over time, cumulative. So it's been a very successful program, one to celebrate with the VA. And then over time, there were a couple of other aspects that through outreach with other organizations, we were able to add to that program. One was for a number of hours of free financial counseling, and that was through a partnership with several organizations. And then more recently, an individual financial health assessment as well, that is basically allows the person to go online and complete this financial health survey, which, based on the response, and it's called VetSense. It's VetSense, within VBBP, but it allows the person completing that, based on those answers, to be referred for other services. So all in all, very successful program. We are making some changes to that program in terms of how we're managing the financial counseling and that financial health assessment. Those programs will continue through a different management means, but the service will still be provided. And of course, the bank locator component of VBBP continues. We've got over 150 financial institutions that are involved in that now. They're not necessarily all AMBA members. It's not a requirement to be an AMBA member, and also it's a mixture of banks and actually credit unions as well, because there's no requirement that it has to be a bank. The real focus is on making sure that veterans have safe and secure means to deposit, have their benefits deposited that they've rightfully earned.
Absolutely. And so I think that program is going to be and can continue to be really impactful. I know that throughout the financial institution land, there are so many different organizations and products that have been put together that are similarly will serve different buckets of people. And so to know that this is out there, and there's such advocacy for our veterans and to make sure that they are being properly banked, I can't imagine the impact that is making for the people that it is serving.
Absolutely. Yeah. You hit on a great point, because there are lots of programs out there and as I'm finding out as well during the time that I've been with AMBA, and we are sometimes in the unique position to kind of be a convener of so many different efforts and bringing different groups or service organizations together to kind of focus and collaborate on ways that they can all be effective as a whole. I would say, even as a veteran myself, and Marty probably would, I don't want to speak for him, but probably would have the same opinion, that there's a lot out there. And, like for a transitioning service member and their family, for sure, it can, it could be potentially overwhelming, because there are lots of folks out there that want to help. And you do have quite a bit of information coming at you when you're transitioning. But there are, like some fundamentals that we can all kind of focus on. And in the midst of that transition, in the course of that transition, one of them obviously is, financial readiness and financial foundation. And it really starts with having, your financial assets in a safe, sound, secure, federally insured financial institution, because that matters as well in the current environment. So yeah, we're grateful to be able to have our members be able to support programs like this.
If you wouldn't mind, let me inject, Linsey. And people that know me will realize that's the longest they've ever heard me be quiet in anything. So
you did a great job.
I know. See, I'm proud of myself. But General George talked about the almost 1 million veterans that have been helped by this banking program. I think the thing to realize is that as compliance professionals, your typical audience, we talk about the unbanked, underbanked all the time in lots of categories. This is probably the one time that you've heard a success story of taking a category of underbanked or unbanked people in our country and serving them. And this is actually quantifiable. It's a real result that has happened. And then I know you're in Tennessee. You're not in Nashville, but Nashville holds a roundup. I don't know that that's the right term, of veterans once a year of the homeless population, where they actually check the homeless to see, are you really a veteran? How do we help you and stuff? And you could see how this connection with these banks who have agreed to do these type of things for veterans, this works exactly to in an auditor term, it maps across, right? This maps across into what they're trying to do as we identify. And someone says, well, this is great that you're offering to do this for me, but I have no bank account for this to go to. This is the solution, and it's been the solution for a number of years. And and I think it's really gratifying for someone who's watched from the other side of seeing issues identified, that here's an actual solution that really there are numbers behind that it really works. So I think for banks that listen, to your podcast, it really is something. There's almost no reason not to participate, and I would encourage them to. And General George is alludes to it, but I mean, I think the military banking is all of us in community banks serve the military and veteran community. Um, every bank should be asking, why am I not a part of this? And so there's my shameless pitch right there.
And that was kind of what I was going to ask about next is because our member base is mainly community banks, what exactly does a successful partnership between a community bank and AMBA look like in practice? How are we working together? What goals are we going towards? What level of involvement do the banks have? How can they participate, etc.?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways. Number one, again, participation in programs like VBBP that are, if if a bank has an expressed commitment to supporting service members in the veteran community, a program like VBBP is one way to do it. And again, that program was based on really an ask from from the VA for assistance from us, and AMBA's had like a history of asks from different agencies because just over 40 years ago, the Department of Defense, really the Department of the Army, came to AMBA with an ask, and at that time, we're talking about the mid 80s. The Department of the Army was asking for assistance in helping our service members to be able to connect to their hometown banks. Because if you think back to this time, I'm not sure if you were alive, Linsey, but Marty certainly remembers this time. There was once a time when the majority of all of us in the service members were being paid by check. You didn't actually get your monthly or mid-month paycheck deposited in an account. You went down to the local cashier's cage or down to a bank and actually cashed a treasury check and so forth. So, but around this time in the mid 80s, we went to direct deposit. And so we had service members who obviously, you sign up for, as part of the recruiting process, you provide your banking information. But ATM networks were fairly nascent at that point, and they weren't all connected. You have a service member stationed in North Carolina, but they're from someplace out west. Well, okay, how do you get to money in your hometown bank? So we worked actually with our similar trade association on the credit union side, Defense Credit Union Council, and established the Armed Forces Financial Network. And really, bottom line with the Armed Forces Financial Network is that it was established as a ATM network to connect service members and their families to their hometown bank wherever they were around the world. And we've continued to maintain that relationship with the Armed Forces Financial Network. We're actually part owners of what I like to just call in shorthand AFN. And so that's, so mentioned VBBP, consideration for participation for a bank in the Armed Forces Financial Network is, like another way to consider support and that is tied to AMBA membership. And then, we do convene events throughout the year that provide the opportunity for AMBA members to get together, collaborate, share ideas amongst members, with industry, and discuss ways to provide services more directly and efficiently to the military and veteran community, because industry is changing so rapidly, and there's again so much really kind of coming at all of us. So how do we stay on top of that? And so our military banking summit offers an opportunity. It's kind of like our capstone event for our members to come together and also meet with federal government leaders, thought leaders in industry, service organizations as well, military and veteran service organizations, to discuss the issues that really are front of mind for support to our service members and their families. So that would be the other thing I would say, is just the opportunity to collaborate for our members in ways that provide real solutions to how they can provide support to service members and veterans. A lot of that, the last thing I'll say before I finish this point, is a lot of that comes also through financial education and programs focused on financial readiness. And I think our members are in a great position based on their place in the community, because they understand what's going on the ground, right? And they can offer some real solutions and provide some great ideas for how to provide support to our service members and veterans. You take something like government shutdown and look at how that can absolutely impact, the threat of something like that impacting our service members and families. And our banks our financial institutions are some of the first to really kind of come up with some great ideas to be able to provide support to our service members and families. And what we've done in the past is actually kind of gather those ideas and share them amongst our members, setting up a page right away on our website and pointing them to resources, and really for our members to be able to share amongst each other is the key with that, because that's who we're trying to serve. We're trying to support our members.
Absolutely. And I know, like I had shared with you guys before, we had several member banks that when the last government shutdown that we had, they were hustling to get that temporary lending component, that program out and ready to help serve those members that weren't receiving their checks for that period of time. And I know that in discussion with you guys, something that I was ignorant to was the fact that I know that your origination started with banks on military property and in those regions. But like I had said, where I have been, where I've worked, we don't have a large base. We are not super saturated with active military, exactly where I'm at. And so what I would like for you to share and kind of delve into is how banks that aren't near a base directly impacted with that. Describe how the population and all of that, how members can still serve when they're not specifically on the base, next to one, down the road from one, etc.
I would say, even though a member bank may not be near, some large military installation, there are certainly reserve component locations either in or near just about every community across the country. So, lots of our neighbors are serving in the reserve component capacity and are mobilized, and when they're mobilized, and they potentially are leaving family at home and are separated, that provides a unique opportunity for a bank to identify, for our financial institutions in the community to identify those folks who are in that role, and really understand how they can best support that member while he's deployed, and his or her family. Being able to have access when you're away like that, I kind of hinted on it with the Armed Forces Financial Network, but being able to have safe and secure access to your, to your financial assets, to your accounts is one way, and understanding and recognizing that decisions still have to be made by the service member or by the family, the spouse who is back at home serving and supporting, is something that's important as well. It's something I personally experienced, because there were a couple of times where I was deployed, and my wife and I are still trying to make some decisions, some financial decisions that required some financial transactions. And basically being able to have access or have security protocols set up whereby if something requires both customers to both the spouse and the service member to make some type of transaction, then understanding that we've got to have the right access in place for the service member to be able to do that is important. So there's the reserve component piece. And then I would still say, even if you're not near a installation, again, there are over, there's like 16, 17 million veterans across the United States, those that have served in uniform. And they all have unique needs with regard to either if they've already transitioned and the opportunities to provide assistance, if they're recently transitioned, with identifying new opportunities for employment. Again, the financial, kind of the financial readiness piece is also very important. And then other programs that can be very beneficial for our veterans, like VA loans and mortgages to help them settle in a community and be able to grow, as well as opportunities for for veterans to start small businesses in their communities, and the information and access to to capital and to small business loans that can help them kind of get something started. So that information is very important, and that's where our I think the financial institutions in the community can work very closely with small business development centers, which I know most of them do in communities across the country, as well as veterans business outreach centers that are under the umbrella of the VA. And we've in our previous events, we've brought examples of that partnership between our member banks and their connection to those organizations within their local community, and the success of those programs in supporting veterans endeavors in their communities.
Absolutely. And as you're going through that, literally all I can think is how this is such a win-win, especially with the success of your veteran banking program as well. Like Marty had mentioned, you guys have the numbers, and also the debanked population that's who we're trying to glean. It's 2026. So many people have access to banking, and to know and to be aware of the fact that there's still such a large population that is not banked. And you guys have that connection that can bridge the gap. I just think that, especially knowing the heart of so many community banks, of how they are basically the cornerstone of communities. But again, I ask those questions about location and military banking and in relation to the military installations, because like I was slightly ignorant as to how we can get involved, but there are people in every community that our banks, especially our banks, as in community banks, can really make a difference and make an impact to that population.
You know, 7% of adult Americans identify as veterans. So it's 7%. We always talk about the 1%. 1% serve, but of the adults, 7% identify as veterans. In the post-Vietnam era, to talk like a history professor, from 73 beyond, our culture in the United States has been uh, we don't go to war without touching everyone across our society. That's what it means to be a volunteer force. So anywhere across America, it is unthought of that there is not a veteran military community within your community bank. It is not possible. That is not how we serve. That's not how our country goes to war or protects our citizens. So we just need to realize that every bank, every successful community bank is already doing this. They're survive. They are a successful community bank because they are serving their community. They just don't realize, to some extent, like you say, who are the veterans and who are not, because they don't normally. Everybody didn't wear a black hat that says, Army or Navy or Air Force. It shouldn't be necessary. They're out there, so we appreciate you being attuned to that and talking through it with us. It's really great to start the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And do you guys have any other points that we want to round before we round out the episode? Anything else you'd like to share with our members? You're muted, Omuso.
Get off the stage if we don't make this point. And it's about advocacy. I want to make sure that we highlight that as well for our members. So there are, I mentioned earlier, there are certainly issues that we absolutely collaborate with some of the other trade associations that are in this space, obviously, on those issues that are important, to our members. And a number of those issues obviously have been front and center in the news over, recently in the last several months with regard to, credit card interest rate caps and Credit Card Competition Act, the Durbin Amendment, and so forth. And, we have worked closely with our fellow trades to come out strong for those in statements for issues that are not obviously in the interests of our members and also impact, and those two things I mentioned, impact our members' ability to provide services to the veteran community, the military community that they support. And then also, there are other issues that we've taken up from an advocacy perspective more recently, and we are involved in one right now. And quite simply, it is an effort. It's our own little effort with regard to CRA reform, the Community Reinvestment Act. And if I could kind of encapsulate it very simply, it is our intent for banks who ostensibly provide financial services to the military and veteran community to receive credit in their CRA examinations for that, to recognize that, and to kind of recognize the military community as a specific group. And this has been an effort that we have been involved in for a couple of years now. But more recently, we have taken up the effort to actually focus on getting a change codified in the actual law. We've certainly had some conversations and will continue to have some conversations with the potential regulators here, in the next couple of months. But the other piece is our continuing efforts to reach out to our representatives on Capitol Hill and help them to understand, number one, who AMBA is, obviously, and the issues that we advocate for. And in this case, this particular issue with regard to a change in the CRA. And we're happy to provide more details on that for anyone that's interested. We do have, one pager. And some of our members are, well aware of this effort that we're undertaking. We've had lots of discussions with our board, and we're going up to the Hill to meet with. We have, and we're going to continue to meet with some members to see what the right vehicle is to get this introduced into legislation. But that is a big piece as well. It's the advocacy piece. With regard to legislative change for those issues that impact our members and, really their ability to support the military and veteran community that they serve.
Absolutely. When you guys had told me about that effort with CRA, it clicked. It just makes sense to me, especially when I view things from, like I said, maybe being a little bit ignorant, but then being exposed to the fact that there are military members all over the country in every community. And it, like I said, it just makes sense. But I do want to thank you guys so much for joining me today on Banking Matters and going through and explaining who AMBA is, how you guys are really pushing forward. And I really hope that this podcast was super beneficial for our members. And I want to thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Linsey. This was great, and we really appreciate the opportunity to, spread the word about AMBA, and we're happy to provide more information to your audience for those that are interested in hearing and learning more about the Association of Military Banks of America.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much, and for the rest of our listeners, that's Banking Matters.